Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, as usual. First of all, I want to take this opportunity again to say thank you for listening to the show. I always appreciate it. Thank you for watching the war videos. Thank you for reading the Substacks if you do. Again, your participation in all of this and this constant learning and then sharing what we learn is remarkably important, and it's not lost on me, your participation in this, and thank you for that. With that said, this will be the last episode until next Wednesday. I'm going to take Monday off. I wish everybody a happy Easter. It's been a very busy Holy Week. Talk about being tested. It's really been interesting and highly educational at the exact same time. Again, I hope that you read the last Substack about artificial intelligence being used again as a legal aid for a great deal of particular inquiries. And I'm going to dive into that a little more specifically, but in the evening of Thursday, as I am recording this here on the 17th of April, there will be another Substack that will be released that, of course, coincides with the previous one that I just wrote, and far more descriptive regarding the current issues, and I would consider it, frankly, the conspiracy to commit fraud regarding the local school district in the town where I live and their misuse of their own Google Workspace suite. So with that said, again, look for that on Thursday night. And also Thursday night, ironically enough, is the local school board meeting, which should also be rather interesting. I will link that in the description below also. It starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday night. You can look it up on YouTube. It's the Talawanda City School District. Should be interesting. Again, I would expect a lot of stupid people to put their foot in their mouth again. But that's kind of par for the course when it comes to these kinds of people. So there you go. Okay, let me mention this real quick. Again, just a couple of basically non-related stories, but I didn't provide any updates if anybody was interested. I did take my dog to the dog chiropractor, an animal chiropractor. Heck of a woman. Again, she works on farm animals, dogs, cats of all ages. Could be a brand new puppy. It really doesn't matter. Absolute professional, knows exactly what she's doing, and I swear by them now. Again, like I said, I've seen YouTube videos of animal chiropractors before, but I'm telling you, I highly recommend it. Again, regardless of the age of the animal that you have, the amount of movement that exists in animals after they are at a chiropractor is night and day. Again, their mood completely changes, improves greatly, range of motion, the whole thing. And it was visibly so with my dog. I mean, she was walking out of her office after she worked on her and again went up and down her spine from the tip of her tail all the way to the very back of her neck and did an amazing job. And you could clearly see the visible motion of my dog dramatically improve, which was great. So yeah, again, I'm heading back, I think next Friday, if I'm not mistaken, for one more appointment, and then again, I'll wait a number of months and then go back, and then wait a number of months and then go back, and it'll just kind of be sort of a regular thing. But yeah, much like me, I mean, I go to the chiropractor every now and again, and it feels great. But yeah, I swear by it when it comes to animals now, no doubt about it. I've seen it firsthand, so there you go. The next thing here that I wanted to do is I wanted to read through some of the comments regarding my last Substack article, which was titled Using AI Against K-12 School Officials, How to Rapidly Learn Policy and the Law in Order to Hold the Guilty Accountable. What I did was, and I typically do this with my Substack articles, and some of them take off and some of them don't, which is fine. But this particular one I thought would be of good use specifically on the chat board greatawakening.win, because again, I know that the people over there care about, of course, education, quote unquote, but more specifically, of course, they're homeschool advocates over there as well. And they're trying to, of course, wake people up and even, again, learn how to use particular systems to their benefit. So I tossed it over there and it got 141 upvotes, which was kind of nice. And it garnered approximately 36 comments. And I wanted to read through these comments relatively quickly. And they're absolutely fascinating, I think. But anyway, I'll just go from top to bottom, and this is what other people said about this. The first person said, I'm finding Grok to be brilliant with my current project at work. Things that would take weeks to research can be done in a couple of minutes using the deep search feature. And then they provide a link. Another person said, putting together my thoughts in a quick and digestible format has saved me hours of tedious work. Another person said, AI is great for organizing, getting a great project path, and making big data super digestible, super time saver. Another person said, I've been using Grok more frequently than the internet of late. It compiles the differing opinions of many people and packages it up nicely. I consider it an aggregate of a ton of opinions, and I find it pretty useful. In my mind, it's not really artificial quote-unquote intelligence, but more like a compiler of information and opinion, unquote. I would agree with that. I would even take it a step further and say there's probably less opinion in it, more specifically when you're talking about legal questions. In those situations, you're actually just getting websites and lawyers, again, referencing specific law, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a little less opinion involved in it and more just straight up facts, which is pretty darn cool. Another person said, just Grok it, quote unquote, needs to replace just Google it. It's like 1,000,000 times better at searching the web. Another person said, or we can repurpose the phrase ask Jeeves to ask Grok. Okay, we get it. Another person said, can also organize big chunks of data any way you need a project done efficiently. Another person said, one weakness I have found with Grok is that it tends to regurgitate the establishment dogma on topics like climate change. Agreed. It says, I should ask it, but, quote, what about the research papers discussed on the, and they list a website here called No Tricks Zone website. I don't know what that is. Again, here's the difference between some of these individuals and me regarding these AI systems. I don't use them to have a conversation because I'm not a loser. I'm not going, hey, what should I do today, Grok? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't know anybody who actually does that. I know that there are people who do, and that's sad. They should go outside and, I don't know, meet a friend or something. But the odd part about it is that it really does work well as a legal guide. And as I say in the article, I would encourage anybody who is still stuck in the education system to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, certainly parents and anybody else. Because again, it's a great aggregate for straight up legal information. It goes on here. Another person said, I think that's because the internet has been so overwhelmed by that narrative that the truth's so repressed that that's what Grok finds. Now that we're able to speak the truth in some places, we can change that. Another person said, hi, I have never used Grok. I tutor high school students and would like to be able to use it as a tool. How does a person go about using Grok? Let's say I need to do research about an astronomy topic, for instance. Thanks. Well, again, that's the problem in the article that I specifically say, I think, in at least one line. I said, you have to be careful about using it as an instructional method for classroom instruction because it doesn't mean that the thing it's going to pump out based on the thing you're asking is going to be accurate. If the thing that you're asking is in fact not accurate, like astronomy, for example, or, planets, how far away is this planet from Earth? That's completely fictitious. That's science fiction. So you're going to get an answer, but the answer isn't based on anything that's actually real. So that's where this becomes a problem. Another person again said, OpenX, choose the Grok symbol at the bottom. Okay, and they describe it. It says there's also an app for it, apparently, in the App Store, which there is. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Another person said, very good article for possibly using AI to put together a decent summary to hand an attorney to fight for your rights, or to use yourself in court, it says, if desired. I hadn't thought of using it this way until reading this, unquote. You're welcome. That was the whole point right there. Another person said powerful assistance to the people. It really is. Again, it's an aggregate. It doesn't slow a person's ability to think, and it doesn't dumb a person down. It's quite the opposite. You're acquiring information quicker rather than going through 20 legal briefs and looking up, page after page after page of state law or federal law. You could ask it again a very specified scenario regarding specified players at a specified location, and then ask it again, is this against the law? And it will provide you state code, state law, federal law, etc., which is really helpful. Another person said, again, you can go to grok.com, whatever else. Another person said, quote, I have found in life that see, this right here is one of these people. I have found in life that convenience robs you of wisdom. Knowledge gained too conveniently also degrades, I can read, in memory faster. Now, I know what study they're referencing because I've read the study on the show having to do with AI dumbing people down in the long run. And giving a false sense of intelligence in the short term. But again, it depends on how you use it and what you're doing. Like I said earlier, if you're having a conversation with it like it's a real person, then you're a fool. But if you're asking it a question the same way that you would be looking up answers in, say, for example, a law book like Black's Law Dictionary, well, then, yeah. I mean, it's going to give you a great deal of information in a short amount of time, and that's a good thing. They went on here. They said finding answers quickly without navigating through all the data, even seemingly non-relevant data, degrades comprehension and mastery. AI is a convenience like any other. Convenience robs you of wisdom by removing experience, which is the cultivator of wisdom. A fat, idiotic, spacefaring crew of the megaship in the movie Wall-E comes to mind. They can navigate the universe, but will likely come to a dead end once the slightest anomaly appears in any of the processes they use to do it, because all critical thinking has been outsourced. AI will further degrade the human race into slavery. Unquote. It depends on what it's doing and who's behind the trigger, as I again said in the article. So again, that's debatable, but I'm not having a conversation with it like it's a real person, because it's not. I'm using it again as a reference tool. And it's not the be-all, end-all reference tool, by the way, which another person I think later brings up here. Let's see. Another person said again, the shackles are more restrictive than that, my friend. We all live in a real-life matrix, but very few know of it or are even capable of grasping it, much less escaping it. God bless us all. Well, yeah, we know the Matrix is real. It's a state of consciousness, and what people believe and what they don't, and all of that. But yeah, I'm not disagreeing with its downfalls, but it depends on how you use it. Again, it's like a hammer. You can use it with a nail in a piece of wood. You can also use it to pull something out. But if you're running around the ground trying to hit a rat with it, that's not a very good idea. Not saying it wouldn't be effective, it just probably wouldn't work out too well. You'd probably hit yourself in the process. It goes on, it says, another person says, I don't pay for X, so I haven't used Grok. How woke does it seem to be? For instance, what does it say about the 2020 election being stolen? J6 and the various allegations of sexual misconduct against President Trump. Well, I don't ask it those questions because I look up that information on by myself. Not to mention I observe by myself. I don't rely on an AI system to tell me about the real world. Excuse me. It's just that's a bit absurd. Person said you don't have to subscribe to X to use Grok, which is true. It is free. Another person said this. Two more comments actually, or maybe three. It says, I've used ChatGPT to research a wrongful termination case for my wife regarding the vaccine mandate. I fact-checked all the case law it cites, and it was accurate and applicable as far as I can tell. However, the following is a case where ChatGPT hallucinated fake cases, and an attorney was sanctioned for citing these fake cases. So always double check. And then they said, can't speak for Grok as I haven't used it for legal research. The next person said, my family is going through a lawsuit and my younger brother has a lot to lose if the win goes to older brother. Anyway, I started asking Grok questions about the case as it evolves in an effort to reassure my brother and cool his anxiety. So far, Grok has been right every step of the way. I even tested it by explaining how I feel about the whole thing as a Christian. I figured it would poo-poo my beliefs. It didn't. In fact, it gave me Bible passages to support the aspect of the situation. So far, so good on all counts. I told my friend that she may want to rethink her career in social work, unquote. Yeah, that's good advice, as even another person responded to and said. So that's kind of my wrap up again on that. It's a good tool for those reasons that I just mentioned, and of course, it's a useless tool and a dumbing down tool for other reasons. But there you go. Now, I've got some other education stuff here in a little bit, but I want to get through a few geopolitical things very quickly here. First of all, as you might know, in Ohio, we have a Vivek Ramaswamy problem. He's not going away. And as it turns out, Dave Yost, the Republican who is running against him, is apparently losing, at least in one poll or two. And he's losing by a great deal. And Vivek Ramaswamy, Ramalama Ding Dong, has apparently quite the lead. Approximately a 71 to 10% lead. This is not good. With that said, polls don't mean anything, and I don't necessarily trust this one. This is from Opinions and Ratings, the politicalpulse.net. And specifically, again, the particular poll here that they reference is the Fabrizio Lee and Associates. There's a Bowling Green State University YouGov poll, and then a National Public Affairs poll, where it has Vivek Ramaswamy again in a substantial lead against Dave Yost. I'm not going to vote for Vivek. I'm going to vote for Dave Yost, and that's kind of that. Again, you're holding your nose with Dave Yost to some extent, but even though he's entrenched in this state as the current Attorney General, again, I'm more likely to vote for him because he has a better grasp as to what's going on. So it's kind of a natural move for him to move to a governor position, and that's kind of that. Again, I know that Donald Trump allegedly, endorsed Vivek Ramaswamy, but we vote next month on this particular primary, so time will tell on all of this. They then, of course, throw Vivek Ramaswamy up against Amy Acton. And there's two Democrats running in this particular poll here. In fact, I don't know if Sherrod Brown is even running. It has him listed as potentially running. Of course, the former senator from Ohio, but they have Amy Acton, who is the former health secretary, if I'm not mistaken, under Mike DeWine back during the whole COVID lie. And this woman is crazy. I mean, there's just no way around that. So I don't think she stands a snowball's chance in hell, frankly. And then you have Sherrod Brown and then the former Congressman, Democrat Tim Ryan, who is allegedly also running for governor also. But in one poll, they have Amy Acton basically in a neck-to-neck dead heat with Tim Ryan. And then in the other one, Sherrod Brown is up 59% over the other two. So who's to say? But either way, further down on this particular website, they have Vivek Ramaswamy going up against Amy Acton and barely losing. And then they have Vivek Ramaswamy going up against Tim Ryan and beating him rather soundly. So again, Vivek Ramaswamy belongs in jail. I think everybody knows that. I've been through it on the show before. I wrote a Substack about it, included a bunch of videos. You can check that out if you're interested. He belongs in jail. Fraud is a serious crime, and defrauding people, certainly through the medical industry and the stock market, is equally as illegal. So I don't know what people are thinking. Again, we don't need criminals and known criminals who have not been convicted running for particular offices. His history is well known. It's out there. There's really no hiding it. The problem is again, you've got a lot of these older conservatives that they see Vivek getting up there, and he says a couple of things that are a little different from the mainstream establishment, and they just buy it hook, line, and sinker. So again, it's not about left or right. It's just about knowing what the truth is. So there you go. Shifting gears, I came across this one. This was GlobeNewsWire.com, and it was titled, "Former Pentagon Insider, quote, the greatest cover-up in U.S. economic history is ending, and it starts this summer." This was from March 26th, so yeah, almost a month ago. It says the following: former CIA advisor, national economic strategist Jim Rickards is sounding the alarm on what he's calling the greatest cover-up in American financial history. According to Rickards, a $150 trillion national trust, as he calls it, hidden for over 160 years, could soon be unlocked, thanks to a quiet but pivotal Supreme Court decision. Quote, "It's been the big secret for years," Rickards says. Yet over time, the estimated size of this fund has grown and grown to the point where its raw value sits near $150 trillion and counting. Buried wealth hidden in federal code. It goes on, it says, at the heart of Rickards' warning is a little-known series of provisions in Title 30 of U.S. Code, originally shaped by the 42nd Congress. These obscure sections govern the management of mineral-rich federal lands covering nearly one-third of U.S. territory. Rickards claims this national endowment, quote-unquote, has been sealed off from the public for over a century, locked away by bureaucratic red tape and environmental lobbying. But now, following the overturning of the Chevron doctrine, the final legal obstacle is gone. Quote, enough to make every family a millionaire, unquote. Rickards emphasizes the staggering scale of the trust. Quote, it's enough to pay off the national debt 4 times over and buy every private home in the United States, he says. Quote, if you divide this figure by the number of households in America, each family would get a check for 1.1 million. He's quick to point out, however, that this isn't a government handout. This is not some kind of government program like those COVID relief checks, but it is a chance for the average investor to become richer than they ever imagined. Washington's failure to act until now. Despite its importance, Rickards says past administrations deliberately avoided tapping into this trust. Quote, if Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Obama, or Biden tapped into it, they would have unleashed a socialist nightmare and destroyed this country. Unquote. It says now Rickards believes that Supreme Court, aligned with former President Donald Trump, has finally opened the door for reasonable access. Quote, recently, his Supreme Court made a pivotal decision, he notes. Not only is the Chevron doctrine dead, but its vast power now lies with the Trump administration, its courts and judges. Unquote. Well, first of all, I don't necessarily doubt that. Second of all, I wouldn't expect every single home to get a $1.1 million check in the mail, and I don't think we should expect that. Paying off the debt with assets that we already possess that have been locked away? Sure. Absolutely. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if by summertime next year, when Doge essentially doesn't close its doors per se, but certainly starts to, I guess, shore things up a little bit and create some long-term summaries as to what's actually going on. I wouldn't be surprised if next summer some kind of a check gets doled out to people, certainly taxpayers or homeowners or whomever, anybody with a Social Security number. But it would make sense, of course, too, that you got to get rid of all of the fraud beforehand. And certainly, of course, the illegal aliens that have been given Social Security numbers unlawfully as they were crossing into our borders illegally. So that'll be interesting. Again, I have no doubt that our country has more wealth than what we've been told. I have no doubt that debt clock, I've doubted it for a very long time. The debt clock that runs constantly in New York City just to scare the, absolute hell out of people. is completely fraudulent, that we really don't have that amount of debt. That it's, again, just designed to either keep people in debt or think that they'll never get out of it, or we won't ever get out of it, and then it will just be this constant political talking point that's sort of regurgitated every, 2 to 4 years. So time will tell on all of this, but I have no doubt that we have more resources at our disposal than what we're being told. Okay, speaking of course, utilizing resources effectively, Sicily, New Mexico sent this to me. This is from KRQE.com, their news channel out there, one of many, and it was titled, Army Gains Control of Federal Land Along New Mexico Border to Bolster Security. This is a fantastic thing. In fact, if memory serves, it's happening now at the southern border with our military in every border state. And the governors don't have a say. But I bet if you hold your ear to the sky long enough, you can hear Governor Lujan Wuhan Grisham out there in New Mexico screeching at the top of her lungs how much she absolutely hates this. So this is wonderful. Again, it says the U.S. Department of the Interior also said that the Bureau of Land Management will work with the Army to ensure that some uses will continue to support local grazing and mining. It says in addition, again, to border security, the Army will work to prevent unauthorized human activity in the ecologically sensitive areas along the southern border. Doug Burgum is involved. Yeah. This is a good thing. We should have always had military at the southern border. I think that goes without saying. But the fact that this is now happening is a very good thing. It's a good move. There's also this one from New Mexico that Cicely sent me. This is from the University of New Mexico, specifically KOB4.com. There's another news channel out there. It says University of New Mexico regents under pressure to end affirmative action. I've got some audio with this one. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Well, tonight, an executive order from President Trump is impacting affirmative action policies at UNM. The Board of Regents approved revised policies on discrimination, in addition to things like recruitment and hiring. Across the country, different universities are under a lot of pressure to end affirmative action and other DEI programs, or maybe lose funding. The deadline set by the president is this coming Monday, April 21st. And with that deadline looming, the UNM Board of Regents voted to approve those changes today.
Cassie Foote found out the changes have left many students frustrated and concerned.
UNM's Board of Regents met Tuesday afternoon. One big item on the agenda, changes to the university's affirmative action policies related to hiring and anti-discrimination and anti-harassment. The policies were revised to remove references to affirmative action and otherwise equal candidates receiving additional weight under the university underutilization policy. Several students have expressed concerns about those changes, including during today's public comment.
The new policy not only removes the terms racial and ethnic minorities, but also women, disabled people, and veterans. If we do not explicitly mention that we, as a university, are committed to increasing access to these groups, then it's not going to happen. Why do you think we needed an affirmative action policy in the first place?
Regents say the changes are being made to keep the university in line with federal requirements.
In order to be compliant with federal law, I think we have to do something, and we have to do it right away.
Those requirements specifically come from President Trump's executive order ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. That order also eliminated a previous order from former President Lyndon B. Johnson, which required government agencies and contractors to have established affirmative action policies. Regents say the changes do not impact UNM's commitments to diversity and equality.
We still have equal employment opportunity. That does not get touched. Equal educational opportunity did not get touched.
Cassie Foote, KOB4.
Regent Victor Reyes presented an amendment to the revised policies today. That amendment would require UNM to provide demographic statistics to the board, among other things. The board rejected that amendment, saying more time was necessary to review it and get input. They asked Reyes to bring it back to their next meeting.
I love it when a plan comes together, don't you? Isn't it wonderful? This is just a beautiful thing, watching all of these people buckle, and you just see how spineless they were from the very get-go. Again, thinking that they could skirt the law, they were all taking advantage of the Civil Rights Act, they were all violating it, because again, the Civil Rights Act is for everybody. Everybody thinks it's just for people with darker skin. It's not. It was for everybody. And it's been violated this entire time, specifically against whites, and certainly Asians. It's absolutely amazing to me. But again, these states and these universities are starting to buckle. Now, there are some, of course, as we all know, that are digging in like ticks because that's what they do. The state of Maine is digging in like a tick, specifically when it comes to, of course, boys pretending to be girls and playing in girls' sports. California, Illinois, Pam Bondi herself and Linda McMahon were having a press conference just the other day on that very issue, and they're, of course, taking them to court and lining up other states to take to court for not following executive orders here. Again, this is the hill that these people want to die on regarding, pretend and discriminating against people at the expense of the brainwashed and the insane. Well, then they're going to lose money. I mean, everybody knows that. That's the penalty. You're going to stop getting federal funds. But they're like, whatever, we'll see you in court. Well, it's not going to hold up in court. It'll be the fastest court decision in the history of court decisions because the law is crystal clear. Again, I like how people are weaponizing the Civil Rights Act to, again, engage in civil liberty. This is a good thing. Now there's this. Shifting gears here. There apparently was another school shooting. This one, of course, not widely discussed in the media for rather obvious reasons. The alleged shooter was black and the victims were black. So, black on black crime in a school is not as sensational as, say, a fake story, like some transsexual allegedly killing people in a school in Nashville. Again, if it's scripted, then every news station is going to jump all over it. And they're going to repeat it and basically just, again, beat it as hard as they possibly can with everything they have, and then run documentaries about it and everything else in order to, again, try to convince people that it actually occurred when in fact it didn't. The real school shootings are the ones that occur at the hands of minorities against minorities by and large, and then are in the news and out in the blink of an eye. And again, this is the real problem with all of this. Certainly this race division and race favoritism, if I was to phrase it that way, certainly in the media, which I'm sure all of you are well aware of. Again, the simple fact that this Carmelo Anthony student, I use that loosely, stabs a white kid in the chest with a knife at a track meet where he didn't even belong and is on home arrest, is beyond absurd. And then, of course, you have this particular case where this individual is behind bars for, again, potentially not bringing a gun in, but someone gave him the gun later on. And then he ended up, again, shooting 4 people. So I've got some audio to play with this. This, again, is from fox4kdfw.com. It was titled, Dallas School Shooting, At Least 4 Hurt at Wilmer Hutchins High School. Suspect in custody. Again, this was on the 15th of April here. But what's interesting about this, too, is that apparently this school has a history of shootings. So this isn't a new thing. Just a couple of bullet points here off the top, and then I'll play some audio with this. It says, at least 4 people were hurt in a shooting on Tuesday afternoon on the Wilmer Hutchins High School campus in Dallas. Dallas fire rescue officials said that the victims are students. 1 victim is in serious condition. The suspected shooter, identified as 17-year-old Tracy Haynes, black male, was taken into custody on Tuesday night, and the school will be closed for the remainder of the week. Now, as it turns out, that's actually the way that a real school shooting and school policy is supposed to basically handle itself. You're not supposed to go back to school the very next day. Again, remember the Madison, Wisconsin fake school shooting right as soon as Trump entered office? Again, that one couldn't have been more fake. The very next day, they were back in school. And the media was like, why are they going back to school after there was allegedly multiple murders of people? Why are they going back into a crime scene like that? They were like, well, they have the choice to go back if they want to, and parents chose not to send their kids, and some did and some didn't, and that's just the way that it was. But if they want to go to school and get an education, then they can. They can step over the brains and entrails of their classmates and do a math problem if they want to. No, that's not what happens. That's not what happens when a real school shooting takes place. You immediately close the building. You keep it closed for an extended period of time. Again, look at Oxford, Michigan. Their buildings were closed for months because that's exactly what was supposed to happen. Again, not Madison, Wisconsin. Doors open tomorrow. See everybody tomorrow. It's completely ridiculous. But again, here in this particular case in Dallas, yeah, closed for the rest of the week, and it should be closed for longer than that too. Anyway, here's the audio that goes along with this. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Suspect in a school shooting that left 4 people injured in Dallas has reportedly turned himself in. Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes.
And I'm Steve Eager. A law enforcement source says the suspect turned himself in late tonight after the shooting that happened early this afternoon at Wilmer Hutchins High School in southeast Dallas. Of the 4 injured, officials say 3 of the victims were shot. The injuries range from non-life-threatening to serious.
Late this afternoon, Dallas ISD officials revealed the suspect was not yet in custody, but stopped short of saying whether the suspect was a student, how they got the gun inside, or any details about how the shooting unfolded.
Fox 4's David Santendry has been in touch with the family members of the suspect, and he is live with more to tell us. David?
Yeah, Stephen, Heather, a law enforcement source tells me that suspected shooter is here at the Dallas County Jail after turning himself in about an hour ago. This was supposed to take place several hours ago at an entirely different location, about a 10-minute drive from the high school over at Dallas Police Department's South Central Division. That did not happen. Some of his family members were on hand there at the police department, as well as dozens of officers just waiting to make sure that things moved safely when he drove up there and was supposed to turn himself in. But then it appears he got cold feet and went to a relative's home. Family members were communicating to us that they were going to meet him and trying to convince him to just do the right thing and turn himself in, be safe. And again, here about an hour ago, he drove himself over here to the Dallas County Jail and turned himself in, according to multiple law enforcement officials. Right now, we'll take you back to where this all began earlier today.
This is a tragic situation, and I know everyone wants answers.
Wilmer Hutchins High School, a crime scene Tuesday afternoon. Dallas Fire Rescue confirms a school shooting. 3 people, ages 15 to 18, taken to hospitals after being wounded by gunfire. The 4th, age unknown, described as having a musculoskeletal injury to the lower body.
What are they not doing up there?
Parents concerned about how a gun made it to campus.
All DISD schools have clear backpack policies from elementary all the way up. So what is it that they are not looking for?
We see what those backpacks look like.
Yeah, they usually check the backpacks.
Dallas ISD police and the superintendent, while addressing reporters Tuesday afternoon, steered blame away from its security systems.
So we do know that the gun did not come through during regular intake time. So it was not a failure of our staff, of our protocols, or of the machinery that we have. So it did not come in through regular intake.
Can you expand on that?
I cannot expand.
We do appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We were only able to take 2 questions, and we appreciate your time.
Can you talk? The district stopped its briefing after taking only 2 questions from a group of a couple dozen journalists. The district will not explain how the gun made it to campus, circumstances leading to the shooting, where exactly it took place, or if security changes are coming.
And it's the second time they had a shooting like this.
In April of last year, a student brought a revolver to Wilmer Hutchins High and shot a classmate in the leg. The shooting prompted many questions about how the student brought a gun to school. In the wake of that shooting, Dallas ISD police revealed Security protocols were not followed. The suspect triggered a metal detector, but no one checked his bag. Now, those questions even more magnified.
Because it's scary and your heart beat fast because you're not there with your child and anything could happen.
So family members of that suspected shooter have provided us with his name and age, but we're not going to release that until some officials here within Dallas County release it, or Dallas ISD's police department. They are the lead on this investigation. Obviously, a whole lot of questions we still are trying to get answered regarding to what led to this shooting, more on the suspected shooter and those victims involved. Steve, Heather, back to y'all.
Yeah, just a couple of questions first. Any updates on those who were injured, David?
Yeah, still no updates on those who were injured. We didn't get any updates from Dallas ISD police earlier when the assistant chief spoke, or the school district when the superintendent spoke. Yeah, but I will say that city council member and Mayor Pro Tem Tanel Atkins told us he expects them to survive. That's what he told one of our colleagues or coworkers earlier today. But to what extent they are injured, we don't know right now.
Well, and were family members able, I know you're no name, that sort of thing, but were family members able to, I don't know, share any insight or what was going on with the suspect or anything at all with the emotion of all this?
Yeah, so it's another good question. So family members say that this child transferred sometime recently within the past possibly year, maybe a couple of years. They were saying he transferred to this school and that there was maybe some drama at a different school, thought he was getting into a better situation. They believe he may have been a victim of bullying. That's just what the family was telling us. But, you know, we have to wait and see what law enforcement tells us, any information that comes out confirmed in a police affidavit or anything like that. So probably too early to speculate.
Right.
Baby child, baby child. Isn't it funny? I mean, it's not funny because people got shot. That's not funny. But isn't it funny that in a moment like that, in the blink of an eye, almost every single subject that I've brought up here on the show, played audio for, whatever, almost 5 years, regarding so-called school safety measures, in the blink of an eye, all of it looks 100% useless and is proven to be useless. Cameras, useless. Clear backpacks, useless. Again, gun detecting cameras, gun sniffing dogs, even if they had any of that. I don't even know if they had it or not. Doesn't matter. Still useless. Locked doors, useless. Staff members, more security, more resource officers, more this, more that, useless. It's all useless. This just proved it yet again. And then, of course, they don't accept any responsibility whatsoever. Well, they didn't enter through the metal detectors, so our hands are clean. And then they just do that with their hands, and then they say, on to the next thing, and then they say, sorry, we can't take any more questions. It's time for us to go. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. And if person A wants to shoot person B, or C, or D, or E, or F, or whomever, at any point, they can. They can bring a gun into a school anytime they want. They can keep it on their person. They can open up a door, have somebody meet them outside of the school building, toss it into them, and then they have a gun inside of the building. The alarms don't go off when the locked doors get opened. And even if they did, wouldn't matter. If a gun gets tossed in a doorway from the outside in, after somebody, again, walks through a metal detector and nothing is detected, then the metal detector is useless. There's also nothing keeping any school building, or any so-called student, again, using that term loosely, from stocking a school building with endless weapons by just opening up a door and having their friend hand them a couple of weapons, and then they hide it in the rafters of, a classroom or a hallway or a bathroom. And then they just leave those weapons there overnight, and then they use them the very next day. You can hide a weapon in a school building. They're massive. I mean, they're huge buildings. This particular campus was enormous. So again, they don't have the people. I mean, they just don't have the manpower. They don't have the eyes. They don't have the brains either to look around and say, well, we got a problem. And then, of course, what's going to happen? You know exactly what's going to happen in that situation. When all of this is settled and all the dust is settled, so to speak, the very next thing that will happen is almost every single parent, if not every single parent, will send their children right back to that scene of that crime to learn. It blows me away. They wouldn't send them into a restaurant where someone was murdered. They'd say, well, you know what, we're going to find another place to eat. But when it comes to a school building, they'll send them right back. I just don't know what I'm going to do with my baby child out of my sight. I don't know what I'm going to do. Stop sending them. If they can read and they can write, and they may not do it well, but if they can read and they can write, and they're at the high school level, they can learn on their own. I bet Texas has an online education service, so to speak, indoctrination service, but I bet they have online instruction. They could use a backup, but they don't know that even exists. They just don't know. Again, only a slavery system and a brainwashing system designed by government would keep people going back to a school building where assault, battery, if not murder, took place. Only a brainwashing system would create such a mind frame in a human being to actually just repeat that kind of behavior over and over and over again. You heard him say again in a previous school year, not that long ago, whenever it was, last year or the year before, a student brought a gun right into the building and shot a fellow classmate right in the leg. Give me a pencil for my homework. And they were like, no. And then bang, shot him right in the leg. I mean, I don't know if that's what it was about, but even so, I mean, that's just ridiculous. But that's also, of course, because this behavior, certainly among some Black Americans, is, it's considered the culture. It's popularized. Walk around with a gun, carry a gun, then you're, the big guy on campus. Somebody lips you off, shoot them or stab them, because that's how you solve your differences. Again, it's a lack of a frontal cortex. I don't know how else to describe it. But with that said, I mean, I'm running under the assumption that it actually did happen. Again, I wasn't there. It looked like a drill. That was my initial take, of course, because I always start there. That it's a drill, that it's not real. If the media jumps all over it, well, okay. They claim they had somebody in custody, okay. The person's apparently a terrible shot, because they wounded, 4 people. I guess one is in critical condition. Again, hope everybody survives. But it's far more real, I think, in that regard than, say, some others. But, yeah, I'm running under the assumption that this one actually happened simply because some of the response certainly seemed more realistic. Now, with that said, there is one thing that seemed kind of suspicious to me. Again, just from aerial footage of watching the whole thing. There didn't seem to be, I would categorize it like this, I guess. There didn't seem to be any coordinated effort to get students out of the building in the way that you might normally see. Again, normally in those situations, there's a lockdown, but I know that even now the policy has changed, and I've even brought up the very, I think, suspicious reasons as to why the policy has changed. There used to be, again, a straight-up lockdown policy. Now they have these, fight, flight, or react, whatever the hell kind of policies where you can either stay locked down if you want as a student, or you can run if you want, or you can fight the individual who has said weapon and attempt to take them to the ground and whatever else. So my question again is how did the individual get away? But if you look at the aerial footage and you see these individuals just randomly walking outside and meandering outside and gathering outside, it shows that there was no coordinated effort to stay in a locked down position and then dismiss them like classroom by classroom or something along those lines. They basically, again, just had them in single file lines walking outside of the building in some instances, and then in others you had students just kind of randomly running around. It seemed a bit chaotic. It seemed a bit odd. And that, of course, would be the situation where a so-called shooter would, of course, escape and run away and not be caught, potentially. So, I don't know. It just seemed beyond strange. Normally, you would stay in a lockdown position. You would either have a meetup space, allegedly. You would have parents, again, wanting to drop by the building to pick up their child. But at the same time, dismissing them in a situation like that would be next to impossible. Certainly in any kind of an orderly fashion or an organized fashion of any kind. I don't know how that would even get done. I mean, me, frankly, I wouldn't stand a chance in that situation because who do you let go first? Are you checking people again on their way out of the door to make sure that they're not armed? To make sure again that you're not accidentally letting the individual just slip through your grasp when in fact they're actually armed to the teeth? I mean, it's an unmanageable situation, and I think that's just kind of my own overall summary and overall point, is these environments are unmanageable from endless situations and endless scenarios. That there's no way that you can get everybody in these environments on the same page doing the same thing at the same time, and even if you did, there's no guarantees. No guarantees that anything would occur smoothly. In particular, like I said earlier, with the changing of all of the scenarios and responses to an alleged school shooting. That you can run in one direction if you want, or you can stay hunkered down in another. Or again, you can attempt to find the bad guy and give him the Chuck Norris treatment or something along those lines. I mean, I have no idea. It doesn't seem manageable by any stretch. So, yeah, chalk one up for again being unsafe. No doubt about it. Not to mention, again, the environment is predominantly black. And, when that's the case, you're going to have more crime. That's a statistical fact, and there's no denying that, and there's no arguing that. So, there you go. Cumulative risk strikes again, after all. And that's a prime example of it right there. Okay, jab-related stuff. This is interesting, ladies and gentlemen. It certainly seems like the jab dominoes are starting to fall here. This is from CBS, of all places. CBS Health Watch. And I've got to play this audio because it really is disturbing. This is from their CBS Evening News Plus fellow. But anyway, it was titled, CDC Weighing End to Universal COVID Vaccine Recommendations. It says a majority of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's work group on COVID-19 vaccines now supports ending the agency's pandemic-era recommendation for virtually all Americans to get vaccinated against the virus each year, officials said Tuesday. This is good. Again, damage done, we know that. And if people are unaware, well, I'm sorry, but you're late to the party here. It goes on, before I play this audio, it says, instead of the agency's long-standing universal recommendation, most of the CDC's advisors and health officials favor shifting the guidance based on people's individual risk or more severe disease. Well, that's not good either. And that's kind of the kicking the can down the road aspect of this that is still disturbing, is they need to take it off the markets. But at the exact same time, I understand the baby step action on all of this. Because if they immediately take it off the markets, again, the panic that would set in among the unknowledgeable and the jabbed themselves would be overwhelming. So I'm going to get into the audio of this. Again, it's a whole lot of evil propaganda in this back and forth and a whole lot of rationalization. In fact, the pseudo-expert that you're going to hear who will introduce himself, his excuse, and it's a bad one, is that all 50 states back during the COVID pandemic, I'm using big finger quotes, that during all of that, every state was basically its own country. and everybody was acting differently and no one was on the same page, and that's why people took it when maybe they didn't have to, and people were forced to when they didn't need it, and they had already gotten sick, so to speak, but they still got jabbed anyway, and no one was on the same page. That's his rationalization as to why the CDC is backing down now on a great deal of this. When in fact, the vast majority of states pretty much took the exact same stance. So in their downplaying and gaslighting of the situation, they're just flat out lying. Or they have amnesia, or they just don't care. Again, I don't know about you, but I remember 5 years ago like it was yesterday. And that was 5 years ago. And it feels like it was yesterday. So give this audio a listen here. It's about 3 minutes long in 3, 2, 1.
We've been highlighting what's changed since the COVID-19 pandemic drove billions indoors around the world and killed more than 1 million here in the United States. So for some perspective, 5 years later, we turn to CBS's chief medical correspondent, Dr. John LaPook, for tonight's interview. Hello, doctor. It's good to see you again. All right. 5 years later, what are some of the big lessons learned?
How much time you got?
Yes, exactly. We'll go to breakfast.
I mean, first of all, it was a stress test on our public health system, which we did not do very well on. We've been chronically underinvesting in it for years, and it showed up. For example, there's no good communication from all the different 50 states. It's like there were 50 different countries to the CDC. The CDC doesn't have the ability, the power to demand that they funnel information back to them. And I was out in California doing a story about public health, and I saw the fax machine that was being used by local doctors to request a COVID test from the public health system in Oklahoma. I mean, there's been electronic secure transmission of information for decades. So way behind, that was one of the first things that happened.
Now we're in the middle. Do you see either any improvements, or do you see kind of the same problems with the measles outbreak and also the avian flu?
I see a lot of the same problems. You know, of course, the science did great. We had these amazing vaccines. We had Project, Operation Warp Speed. We had messenger RNA. We had understanding that it's in the air, the aerosolization. So a lot of things were learned. But the big problem was communication, right, and public trust. And I think there was a lot of mixed messaging where people were hearing one thing from one person, one thing from another person, and not always a scientist or person who was trained in public health communication in terms of communicating information. And that's a problem. You know, I am so careful about every word. You can't unsay something to 5 or 10 million people.
Right.
And I think there was a lot of stuff said. And there was also, I think we learned some humility. You know, we were criticized for saying, look, this is the way it is, and not really emphasizing, but it could change.
Right.
And I know that we said that all the time, but people forgot that. And they also forgot, I think there's some amnesia, how bad it was at the beginning. I was on the COVID wards in April of 2020 at NYU Langone Health from a professor. People were dying left and right. We were worried about, remember, bending the curve because there wasn't enough resources. So when people talked about, staying home and all the measures that we took, they kind of forget, that was happening, but it was coming out of that in a smooth way, the smooth transformation that was tough.
What I want in the last 30 seconds, John, is the mRNA was a major factor. What's on the edge that's coming that excites you that might help with the next pandemic?
Well, I think messenger RNA, again, is an amazing thing in terms of vaccines, but of course it's coming under challenge right now given the new administration. And I know a lot of my colleagues are very concerned about whether there's going to be the kind of support for basic science that we need. And remember, President Trump was saved by monoclonal antibodies. The research for that happened over 30 years before that. So it's not like you can get sick and say, okay, let's do the research. You have to rely on the research done decades ago in order to have the drugs ready when you need them.
Dr. John LaPook. Thank you, John.
Dr. John LaPook. Okay. First of all, every single thing he said is a lie. Every word. And you know it. And the hypocritical things that he said in that entire thing are over-flippin'-whelming. And what he said at the end was really the cherry on top. He said Donald Trump was saved by monoclonal antibodies, and the research for that existed 30 years ago, because you need that much research over that amount of time in order to give something effective to someone to help them. So when was the public told that the COVID, quote unquote, vaccines, quote unquote, were developed? And how quickly were then they introduced into the populace around the world? They were told that those shots were created in the summertime of 2020, and that it was the fastest a vaccine had ever been developed. So in his admission at the end, he's openly admitting, or I should say his attempted omission, he ends up admitting that you need extended period of time to test a medicine before you find out whether or not it actually works for anything, thereby admitting inadvertently that the shots don't do anything regarding some so-called illness. He just admitted it. He also, of course, used the phrase mixed messages, that there were too many mixed messages and too many individuals with non-medical degrees out there saying things who are not qualified to say such things. So he engages in sophistry on a constant basis, clearly. You can't know anything if you're not a medical doctor, according to him. And people like me, and people like you, who spoke out against it publicly, privately, among our friends, family members, whomever, that there's something wrong with us. Does this sound like a guy who's learned anything, really? Well, how much time do you have? We have until breakfast to talk about all the things that we've learned since the COVID pandemic. This guy's lost his flippin' mind. And then he advocates for mRNA vaccines. In the same breath. What else did he say? This was a good one. He said we need more investing. At the very beginning, he said we need more investing in public health, and we didn't have enough public health resources and investing in public health resources. That's code language for saying we didn't work hard enough to convince everybody to get jabbed up. That's it. They actually believed, and he believes apparently, that more money needed to be thrown into the propaganda message, that more people needed to take the shots. When in fact, if you recall, the propaganda was not only thick, it was constant and it was everywhere. Billboards, buses, bus stops, shopping malls, stores of every single kind. They were playing it over the speaker systems in Home Depot, for Christ's sake. And Menards. I told that story rather famously a number of years ago. I was in Menards with my mom back in 2020, and people were losing their minds. They were walking around with the weirdest masks on their faces you've ever seen in your life, and it's playing over the speaker system. Menards is a hardware store, by the way, for people who aren't aware. I'm not talking about my Nards, but actually Menards. Anyway, they're playing it over the speaker system, and they're saying things like, make sure and wear your mask and stay 6 feet away from the customer next to you, and, listen to your health professionals and try not to get COVID, and if you feel sick, don't enter our store. I mean, it was just this 1984 dystopian nightmare. That's so fresh in my mind. People waiting outside of Home Depot, and they were scanning people's foreheads to see if they had a fever before they could walk in, and then they're only allowing a certain number of people to enter these stores, and giving them a set amount of time to get the thing that they need to get and then leave, and then people are still lined up to even enter. It was just pure insanity, and it was all for nothing, because COVID doesn't exist. And then, of course, he brings up as well that we learned that it's aerosolized, it's in the air. If that's the case, then why on earth are so few people wearing masks these days? Next to no one. And they're coughing on each other on a constant basis. If it's aerosolized, what the hell is he talking about? Well, it isn't aerosolized. Number one, coughing on people isn't how you spread illness. Number two, COVID doesn't exist. Let me read this quick little description. This proves my point. How even the things taking place today are actually more insane than what was going on back in 2020. I'm a part of a text thread here with Jesse James and Sandy Adams, and a friend of theirs who, again, we've been texting back and forth for years now. They said the following here. They said, quote, and this was just today as I'm recording. They said, so get this. I've been sick since Sunday. They're not jabbed, by the way. They said, like just knocked on my ass. They said, I finally go to urgent care last night, and they're like, you have COVID. I didn't even know they tested me for COVID because they didn't stick the nasal swab halfway up my brain. But I'm like, okay, so I have the flu. Doctor says pretty much. I ask her how long I am contagious. And mind you, she's in my face looking down my throat with no mask on. She says, oh, you're not contagious anymore. As soon as my fever went away, I stopped being contagious. So I'm like, okay, so when my fever broke literally that instant, I stopped being contagious? She said yes. But if you Google it, CDC says you're contagious for 8 days. She says it's not true, though. She said I could go back to work or whatever. She offered whatever it is they give people for COVID, and I said, no thanks, I have ivermectin and quinine at home. She said, okay, and double up on vitamins D and C, unquote. I mean, I'm almost speechless. I'm almost speechless. The charade is so huge, even today, regarding their response to again, something that everybody would have thrown their family members off of a cliff if they thought that they tested positive for COVID, quote unquote, back then. That now you can just cough in each other's faces from doctor to patient and it's no big deal. So what in the hell's changed? Well, nothing. Nothing's changed. We're right back where we all started. People are believing lies. They're applying these lies. No one's on the same page of the actual truth. They're just manipulating lies and then recycling them over and over and over again for different people in different locations. But the funny part again is that they're all wrong. They're all wrong. Because if they're not saying COVID doesn't exist, the flu doesn't exist, masks do nothing, you're not contagious from a coughing and sneezing standpoint, that's not how it works. I mean, if they're not saying those things, then they're just flat out wrong. And of course, as we know, if anybody's still advocating for shot taking, well, they've lost their minds. Because they haven't learned anything in 5 years. When this was the subject at the forefront for certainly the first at least 2 or 3. Blows me away. It's exhausting. But at least again, there's sort of a weakening and a deadening of some of this hysteria. And we know full well again that the bad guys wanted to kick this into gear. Case in point, the WHO, as it turns out, finally agreed to the legally binding pandemic treaty. Remember all of that discussion here on the show and back in the alternative news, so to speak? That the WHO was, of course, creating this massive treaty that everybody had to abide by, and then one by one, states in the United States were saying, yeah, we're not going to do that. Doesn't matter what the WHO says, we're not playing their games anymore. And then countries started to drop out and, those dominoes kept falling, which was great. But that didn't stop them from, of course, going ahead with their ridiculous paperwork. Again, this is from the BBC. It's rather brief. It says the following. Members of the World Health Organization have agreed the text of a legally binding treaty designed to better tackle future pandemics. It says the pact is meant to avoid the disorganization and competition for resources seen during the COVID-19 outbreak. There was no outbreak. And again, as the brainwashed doctor on CBS said, if patients were dying left and right when he was on the COVID wing of his hospital of some university, it's because the hospital itself was killing them. That was the point. And again, I love how they're screaming for more medical resources and they needed more money for medical tools and XYZ when all they had to do was give them ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. If in fact they were ill, which they may not have been. They come in with high blood pressure, they go, you got COVID, intubate them. And then they cram the tube down their trachea, and then before you know it, they're being given remdesivir and God knows what else, fentanyl, of course, and then they end up dead. And then, of course, the hospital gets a huge kickback. So no, there weren't endless people in body bags. All of that was pretty ridiculous. It says key elements include the rapid sharing of data about new diseases to ensure scientists and pharmaceutical companies can work more quickly to develop treatments and vaccines. Jeez, H. I'll tell you what, the gall of these people is astounding. They haven't learned anything, but then again, they're behind it, so they know exactly what they're doing. It says for the first time, the WHO itself will also have an overview of global supply chains for masks, medical gowns, and other personal protective equipment, PPE. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus described the deal as, quote, a significant milestone in our shared journey toward a safer world. Quote, member states have also demonstrated that multilateralism is alive and well, and that in our divided world, nations can still work together to find common ground and a shared response to shared threats, he said. And then called it a historic agreement. The legally binding pact reached early on Wednesday came after 3 years of talks between member states. It's only the second time in the WHO's 75-year history that an international agreement of this type has been reached, the first being a tobacco control deal in 2003. Well, we know why that's the case. Nicotine cures a great deal of things. It's an antioxidant. It's a anti-inflammatory, straight nicotine. And of course, it's an anti-parasitic. And it kills nanotechnology inside of your bloodstream. It says it still needs to be formally adopted by members when they meet for the World Health Assembly next month. U.S. negotiators were not part of the final discussion after President Donald Trump announced his decision to withdraw from the Global Health Agency. Excellent. And the U.S. will not be bound by the pact when it leaves in 2026. Good. Under the terms agreed, countries will have to ensure that pandemic-related drugs are available across the world in a future outbreak. See, now I would be suspicious. And more so about any drug that the WHO approves in all of this. Hell, they could be handing out AZT for all anybody knows. It says participating manufacturers will have to allocate 10% of their production of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics to the WHO. Another 10% will be supplied at affordable prices, quote unquote. Well, I think it's pretty clear, having, of course, learned something over the last 5 years, that you shouldn't take anything. Certainly not from the end of a needle, let alone a nasal spray or, hell, an oral therapeutic for that matter. I mean, it's really come down to that. It says countries also approved the transfer of health technologies to poorer nations as long as it was mutually agreed. It says that should enable more local production of vaccines and medicines during a pandemic, but the clause had been extremely contentious. Right. Because no one wants either of those things. It says developing countries are still angry at the way wealthy nations bought up and hoarded vaccines during COVID-19, while countries with large pharmaceutical industries worry mandatory transfers might undermine research and development. Good Lord. If a country is worried that they didn't get enough vaccines, then they lucked out. They lucked out because they weren't subjected to them. But I like how they spin it to make it sound like everybody wants vaccines and more people wanted them, but no, countries like America were hoarding all of them. A great deal of us didn't take them. Unfortunately, plenty did. It says, at the core of the agreement is a proposed pathogen access and benefit sharing system, PABS, allowing the faster exchange of data between pharmaceutical companies. You know what that means? That means wireless body area network. That means the medical wireless body area network, more specifically. That's also what they're advocating with this entire thing. They wrapped up and said that should enable those firms to start working on new drugs more quickly in any future outbreak, unquote. There won't be an outbreak. There's just an outbreak of illness among those who actually took the shot. That's about it. I'm going to end on this note. This is a good one. Again, this is chipping away, and this is, of course, knocking the dominoes down one at a time, which is a good thing. Of course, many of us, including yourself, I'm sure, already knew this. But the business of ADHD and being properly diagnosed is coming out now more and more and more. Of course, there have been endless books that have been written about how the entire thing is fraudulent. But they're openly saying again that there are no accurate tests for it whatsoever. And that it's increasingly, I'm quoting here, unanchored from what we're finding in our science as far as a clinical definition of ADHD. You see, the reason that there's no test for ADHD is because the test would have to rely on something that is substantial, accurate, and actually exists. And then, of course, it would have to test for that reality. But there is no reality with ADHD as a standalone illness. What it is a neurological poisoning and symptoms plural, from being poisoned. And that poison comes from neonatal shots that the child is given before they are born, while still in the mother's womb, that the mother directly receives, and, of course, what a child receives after birth and throughout their early childhood. Some individuals, again, have received vaccination, which of course are loaded with aluminum and formaldehyde and polysorbate 80 and endless other poisons, not to mention, of course, the mRNA nanotech. And they've taken these shots as teenagers. And even again in like middle school age. And before you know it, they go from being 100% with it to all of the sudden not. So again, the reason that there's not a test, and it should be rather obvious at this point, that doesn't test for it, is because the whole thing, again, was built on quicksand. The entire thing was based on a lie. And if you just work the problem backwards, you arrive at the thing that caused it, which is vaccination. Again, I heard a lot of people, it was the diagnosis was, of course, so broad that even if a child was not vaccinated, and they were just looking out a window, or they were fidgeting, or they were sitting again in a specified chair or a desk within a classroom for too long, then the school teacher would say, "Well, do you have ADHD?" And they would ask the parents in a student conference, and then before you know it, the kid's on drugs. I've told those stories on this show forever. If anybody's a current or former educator, or even not, and you've had any interaction with any situation like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're quick to the drug, and they're not quick to understand that maybe it's just the person's personality, and maybe it's just that, and maybe it is the fact that they are in fact drugged, and that the drugs are the problem, and the vaccinations are the problem. So once you start unraveling this yarn, you'll eventually, of course, get at the core and get at the answer, which is that it's shots and that it's drugs, and that is the problem. Both from, again, before being born, in utero, all the way to, of course, being born and after the fact. So I like that that's unraveling. That's a good thing. And more people, again, need to start waking up about this. I mean, there's endless books and endless documentaries out there about that very subject. So, I was going to end on a positive note, but this just came across the screen here. There was an active shooter apparently at Florida State University in Florida, in Tallahassee, on their Tallahassee campus. Let's see, at least 6 people have been injured. Apparently someone is in custody, and that's about all the information I have. So, yeah, people should be allowed to carry guns on campuses if they're going to be foolish enough to still attend. But again, the timing of this seems rather interesting. No doubt about it. And again, if somebody is in custody and that somebody just so happens to have dark skin, you can almost guarantee that, it's not going to get a whole lot of play in the media beyond the initial reaction to the actual shooting itself. It'll quickly die down and go away, just like the Dallas K-12 shooting the other day. Same thing. But again, pray for those involved and certainly any victims in those situations, certainly if they be real, as opposed to, of course, a non-existent shooting or some kind of a drill. But apparently, again, the feds are there. Not that that necessarily means anything, but Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, they've all been briefed, I guess. Trump's been briefed, the whole thing. Again, it doesn't matter who's in these positions and who's in these offices necessarily. They can still attempt to pull off a fake one. Of course, they did it in Madison, Wisconsin, as I said earlier. But again, I'm not saying this is fake. I saw an image. Apparently, there was a black female student just casually walking past a white female student who is on the ground, not moving, and it looks like blood is coming out of her rear end as she's lying on the ground. But the black student's just sipping on coffee with her cell phone recording, or his or her cell phone, just again casually walking by and not even helping the person. So, yeah. They're trying to stoke something up here. They're trying to get some kind of a race war going. They're using all of these, again, race-related violent events as of late to try to maybe stoke the flames of another Summer of Love 2.0 circa 2020. I mean, who's to say? But I don't think anybody's really going to buy into it. It's just going to be a matter of there being swift justice, that's all. That's all people want. That's the only thing I think any of us really want. Okay. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. Happy Easter to everybody. Have a great Good Friday as well. And I will catch you next Wednesday. Going to take Monday off. Stay tuned, of course, this Saturday for a war video if you're interested. There will be one on Monday also. And the upcoming Substacks as well. I'll probably have 2, at least, that will come out here within the next few days. Certainly one, again, here tonight, Thursday night, and then the next one shortly thereafter. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again as always, and I will catch you next Wednesday. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.